Hello and welcome to the next episode of Conversations, or wait a minute, monologues about language teaching, because I'm here solo representing the podcast Conversations about Language Teaching. I'm usually here with my podcast partner, Dr. Reed Riggs, but his school unfortunately changed some scheduling at last minute, so he wasn't able to join us today. The podcast Conversations about Language Teaching is Reed and I, and occasionally a guest, talking through some issue of interest to us that often bridges a little bit of a researcher kind of a mindset with a language teacher and classroom learning mindset. And we like to bridge between the two and really think deeply and rigorously. And so if you like really pondering, how does this stuff work? How can I make it work better? Our podcast may appeal to you. And one of our favorite podcasts is the podcast of the people that I'm going to let introduce themselves right now.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of SLAyyy, a second language acquisition for everyone. My name is Ben Fisher Rodriguez. My pronouns are he, him.
And I am Bill Langley Bostic, he, him.
And I always forget she, her.
Excellent. The format of our podcast is that we are two classroom teachers who just like read and research. And so we typically like to gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss our way to excellent modern research-supported language teaching. And what that means to us is that we tackle ways that we have viewed a topic within language teaching that have not worked out, that have not been backed by research, that have just flopped. That is our gaslight section. And then in the gatekeep section, we ungatekeep a piece of research literature that we find interesting and may be relevant to our classroom teaching contexts. And then we girl boss into the sunset, where we share our pro tips, hard-fought victories, expertise and wisdom that we have gained from other teachers along the way. And sometimes we are referencing information that we may have learned on the Conversations About Language Teaching podcast. And so Bill and I are so happy to be with Diane here today and are saying hello to Reed and are thankful to Karen for inviting us as to be part of the CI reboot in this way. And we are ready to have a conversation about language
Oh, geez.
teaching.
Nice job. Okay.
So I think we had discussed that we wanted to kind of like cross it over. We'll do the kind of like back and forth conversational style of conversations about language teaching, maybe within the pods of our SLAyyy kind of format. And
Yeah.
our overall topic for this episode was going to be talking about language acquisition research. If you're in the IFLT group, if you're interested in the CI reboot, you may be looking for a kind of teaching that is new to you or different from what you see your colleagues doing or different from things you've seen before or experienced as a learner. And you may hear presenters talk about the research backing and researchers' names and research movements and things like that. Um, Obviously, we have an interest in this sort of thing. We both make podcasts based around language acquisition research. Um, and so we wanted to talk about how to convey what we are learning in things like this. How do we convey the SLAyyy research that we come across in our professional lives online and with colleagues and at conferences to others, to other stakeholders, teachers, administrators, students, their families, in ways that have been successful and less than successful. Um, and so let me open it up. Billiam, perhaps, what is a way that you have gaslit yourself when it comes to trying to convey the giant body of second language acquisition research to another party?
Well, oh boy. Uh, do I have a story? So it was in attempting to convey research to a fellow teacher, and I was met with disinterest and uh, more, but we'll leave it there. And uh, I was just thinking, like, why can't like I get this across that like, oh, maybe we should be trying to actually talk about things in class. Maybe we should try to make sure that students understand what we say. Um, and I got pushback, and that actually led me to, it led me to SLAyyy, essentially. Like, After that, I had already known that I wanted to get a master's. I did the MAFLT program at MSU. Great program. And then I wasn't done yet. So I started a PhD in the best year possible, 2020. Uh, nothing,
Nothing
nothing else
else to
going on
do.
that year. Mm-mm. Um, but then after a year of that, I uh, moved schools, and I'm fortunate enough. Like although I had to stop my PhD program, um, I am very thankful and very privileged to be at a school that supports my education. So now I'm working on my EDD in second language instruction and instructional leadership, and with a focus on how to share research in a way that is actionable, relevant, and accessible.
Sweet.
Yeah, sounds terrific.
Yeah. So that's kind of just like my trajectory. Um, and a lot of things have not worked. A
Mhm.
lot. So name dropping, people don't like it. Um, and they want to see what you're actually talking about.
Yeah.
Show, don't say, but then guide.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you all?
Yeah. So my first thought was that kind of my trajectory was as a classroom teacher. I taught Mandarin Chinese for 10 years, and somewhere along the lines of 7 or 8 years into it, I really got interested in this whole idea of comprehensible input and its power in working with students and helping them acquire language, develop spontaneous ability to produce language when they needed it, to understand more than my students could from just doing textbook practice stuff. And so I was really keen on understanding it. And my mindset at the time, I'm going to use a word that I'm afraid might be a little bit triggering. So I'm going to call it fundamentalist. And I don't mean it in a religious sense about this thing, but I mean that I had a mindset that was like, this person good researcher, that person bad
Mm-hmm.
researcher. I need to find the true researcher, and so I'm afraid I got a little bit bombastic, perhaps, or a little bit of like, oh, I don't trust that person over there, or ooh, Actful says that thing. Oh, that's not. And so I was doing a little of that more than I think was productive, and it was shutting me off from some of the learning I could have
Mm-hmm.
done. However, as a classroom teacher, you don't have much access to research, and the world of language related research, whether it's cognitive, social, language classroom stuff based, there's so very much of it. It's like oceans with currents through it. You might know what currents there exist, but you don't know all of the articles at all. There's tens of thousands of articles on some topics. So just knowing like that was for me the first year of my PhD was like, whoa, this is so much bigger and so much of it related more than just, this researcher or that researcher. I needed to really kind of open my mind and hold space for thinking a little more deeply and with nuance. So a lot of research has been very interesting to me because it cares about the things that I care about too, whether or not it was really focused on comprehension-based teaching. And I see, Bill, you've got your hand.
Yeah. Two things. One, new metaphor.
New metaphor?
Is that a new?
The
Yeah.
the
That's
oceans?
what the ocean
I've
one?
used it
Is that
before.
relative? Oh, have
I've
you?
got another one. Do you want another one?
Ooh, yes.
A bar. People
Mm,
at a bar. And there are conversations at the bar where some are up at the counter and they're like talking amongst the people sitting at the bar. And sometimes they like look over at the table in the corner and like, those folks are talking about the thing over there. And then the people at the table, maybe one of them gets up and walks over to another table and starts talking about that conversation. And it's these long, slow conversations with people, some in, this area, some in that area, some reading each other's, but not really talking, this sort of thing. So I found that helpful too. I got
mhm,
that from something
mhm.
and I can't remember to cite it. it was a grad student, like learn how to be a grad student and not die from it kind of a thing when I started my PhD.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Um, Great. That love it. Second thing, and just to put a bookmark in it for later, um, a lot of what you're talking about. So Ben and I did an episode a couple like month or so ago where we read an article that I was assigned for my reading for class. It was not as fruitful as we had hoped. Um, However, it was a foundational reading for the course because boy, oh boy, um, has there been advances in my teaching, uh, and it's all of these different aspects of language learning. Like it's not just the one part of language learning. So um, there's so many pieces that go together. And anyway, we can talk more later on air or
I
off
think
air. I
that's
don't know.
I think that
Probably
touches
both.
on like a big like overarching thing of like many aspects of life, I would say, is that like I was reading somewhere about like in education we want to find the silver bullet for reading achievement, the silver bullet for math achievement, the silver bullet
Mhm.
for student engagement, and kind of like the one thing. And we've seen if you've been in the game for any number of minutes, project-based learning comes on a wave, and then
Hmm.
direct instruction comes on a wave, and then it's followed by no, discovery learning or whatever, kind of big educational buzzwords. And I think that the same thing is true because I teach high school German, and I am the only teacher of German at my school, and I'm teaching 3 or 4 different courses all at the same time, and that if I have 2 planning periods, so that's roughly 25 to 30 minutes to plan each course in its entirety every day, um, and grade
Yeah.
and call home and all sorts of, what I mean? Yeah, we all know what it's like to be a teacher. But I think that in that kind of sense of time lack, we're looking for quick
Mhm.
answers to our questions. Is it worth it if I sit down with a red pen and this piece of writing and do something like that? Is it more worth it if I try something else instead? Is it worth it to try to create a structured input activity if I'm not so sure about the principles? Is it going to do anything? Is it worth it to try to redo my interpersonal speaking activities? Is it worth it trying to redo my rubrics? And who has the answers for those sorts of things? And I would find like we read articles, and I'm very thankful that like our podcasts are in conversation, and that like I'm the only person here not pursuing anything. I got a bachelor's degree and I'm chilling, and I am so thankful to like listen to the ways that SLA researchers, but then also y'all plus and Bill talk about research as this like yeah this one study showed this one thing in this very specific circumstance, and so maybe we could say that could work for you, but like. Some of us teach in schools where the maximum class sizes are in the teens, and then some of us teach in schools where we have classes of 37. And so something doesn't work for that reason. Or you have
Right.
resources to do something digitally that someone else doesn't. You have extra time, you have you're district supported in rewriting your units to be more proficiency oriented in things. Um, Everything is so heavily contextual. And so we go into our research articles being like, aha, we're going to do one about pronunciation. And we try to give our like fun pronunciation tips, but then we don't have the answer about pronunciation and how
Mhm.
and when and how much. We come away with kind of like, I have likened comprehensible input to like painting a wall with a spongy roller, is that you do one go and it's kind of like still a little bit see-through. You can still kind of like whatever. And then so you hit the same spots again with the same ideas and the same input until becomes more opaque and the color you actually want it to be and has a stronger appearance. And so it takes a lot of that. There's no like we run podcasts about research and then at the end of the episodes we're always like, yeah, so that's something kind of.
Yes. Yes, I love that metaphor of the painting and the repeated, and it's not even and smooth and everything. And the thing that I was going to say, that what you were talking about reminded me of the concept of post-method teaching. And I was introduced to this through my PhD, so I assume it's not really out there in general. But it's from like around 1989, 1990, where people like I had an episode with Reed on the podcast about the article by Prabhu in, I think it was
Mm,
1990.
yep.
There is no best method. Why? And the idea of it was not like I saw the title, I was like, oh, I was assigned it to by my advisor, who I love. And I think she knew I needed this article because it really opened my eyes to the fact that those sorts of things matter. The context matters. But there are also principles. There are core things that we're all seeking. And if our goal
Mhm,
is for the students to develop proficiency in the language, slash fluency, slash, acquire language, however you want to describe your end goal, it's communicative competence of some kind. They can use language, they can understand language, they can produce it, they can do it in a culturally appropriate way, those sorts of things. That kind of context-based thing using principles to guide rather than I have magic formula X, I must do it. If it didn't work, then I reject, Formula X and I'm going to find
mhm,
Formula Y. That's the right way. And like that kind of thing is one side of the problem, like where we get fixed, like, can I find the one perfect thing? Or the other problem can be like, oh, nothing matters. You just throw everything at it. We need to try a little bit of everything. And no, we can be more discerning than
mhm,
that, even though it's, really, I think ultimately all of us in our own teaching context becomes the expert for that context as best we can. We're the best person to know what we need and what the students are doing now and what we could do to help take a next step,
mhm.
especially as we continue to grow as people and learn more too.
My question that I was contemplating in the drive over is then like we've been talking kind of meta about conveying research to others. Are there particular like second language acquisition specific ideas that you have encountered the most resistance to? And the one that has jumped out to me is the we need to know grammar before they can speak. Like that grammar is fundamental to
Ooh,
speaking is kind of
ooh,
the one that
ooh.
I'm running into a lot. And that one is really hard if that feels so deeply ingrained in sort of the context where I am kind of broadly just where I like live and work, that I have to find ways to respond to that in an intelligent and supportive way and in, ways that will probably fit into the girl boss part of this podcast of like, how do
Yeah.
I respond to like with someone who says like they have to know grammar in order to speak. So we're not doing speaking practice yet. We're doing grammar first.
Mhm.
And Bill's having a fit. So Bill, tell us what's going on through your mind.
Yeah. So I spent about 5 hours yesterday recording a 17-minute video. Um, and, how many times do you restart? I was trying to get it to 10 minutes. Anyway, on uh, language transfer. And something that like came about, and I know that I'm really proud of this, that these synthesized things. But um, like the thing that we as language teachers um, might need to hear um, is that students already come into our classrooms with a linguistic system. They already have the cognitive ability to use their first language system to support their understanding in their second language. For Spanish, it's still subject, verb, object. It's an language. Um, so students can rely on that because they already have that system in their head. My students are English speakers, so that's the system that they have. Um, However, so like the things that are similar, we might not really need to worry that much about. Um, but it's where there is no overlap, where one language system has a feature that is not even a concept in the other.
Yeah.
Um, like, why do students get the preterite and imperfect confused so much? Because we don't have to think about um, like how the action was being done. We just know that the action was done.
Mhm.
Um, so like when our students don't have even like a conceptual framework of how that might work, then they can't attach it to anything. So
Yeah, they're building it
sorry,
from
I don't know
scratch.
if right.
Mhm.
So I don't know if so one, um, throwing these metalinguistic terms at them and adding an additional layer of cognitive overload, because now I have to think, what does this definition mean? When do I use it? Um, and I think that there is a much more communicative way to go about intervening, if that's what you would like. I think that's what I'm going to go with, calling it like an intervention. Like, I noticed this thing: students aren't getting preterite and imperfect. They're not getting enough context to understand what that feels like, what that language feels like, and what it feels like when that's wrong. They don't know what it feels like. They don't get what was it? I forget where this was from, but um, uh, and someone correct me, but it was something about students like bad, uh, not bad, but non-native like input. Um, not like it's not going to mess them up. It's
Oh
not going to
yeah.
mess up their entire system if they
As long as
like,
they get the good stuff somewhere, right? The
yeah,
more
yeah,
native like.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think
I
in our
think,
guest
yeah.
episode with Timothy Chavez that he brought up that like students also have a level of discernment of like who they're hearing
Mhm.
input from, like that they are like,
Yeah.
okay, like this is like a peer who's like trying just like me.
Right.
And they may be able to be a little bit more discerning about like, yeah, they don't have it perfect because we're both learning and like we're in a situation where we learn, but like the teacher definitely does, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got another one to your question, Ben, if I can jump
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
The like topics that people were most concerned about that I've seen with mainly thinking Chinese language teachers right now,
Mhm.
like that they really had a strong influence from like the audiolingual method, I think. The idea that you have to get it right in the beginning or you're going to screw up for your rest of your whole language experience. So it was often in Chinese circles, it's around pronunciation, and they want to do like
Mm,
pinyin drills for a long time and explain the
mm,
whole pinyin system, have students practice doing, bo, mo, po, fo, bo, mo, po, fo, and like, and teach them tones and have them analyze tones and all of these very explicit language pieces without any communication at all because there's not even word knowledge sometimes in those drills. So the thing that I had found worked once, at least, when it was a really big pushback. Someone saw me teaching. I was teaching in a lab at the Agen workshop, another wonderful CI conference. The At the end of the first hour or two, she observed my students kind of, trying out new words, just a little try out here and there that they just started hearing. So things like 想象 sounds a little bit like not like English, and they had a little trouble getting some of those words out. I wasn't worried. I just kept communicating with them. I could tell what they meant. But this Chinese language teacher was really concerned, and I saw the concern, and I said, I think I see that you're really concerned about them being able to be understood by native speakers. And she's like, yes. I said, I have that concern too. And what I see happen is if I give them some more time, they hear the language so very much, they start to produce it more and more like a native speaker would, at least well enough that a native speaker can understand them well. And so I encourage you to listen this week as I continue teaching them a few more hours. And if you have the same concern at the end of the week, let's talk about it again. She didn't come back. They really were starting to produce language and they were sounding quite good. They were very understandable. So I think sometimes that, like to Bill's point earlier about, show, don't tell. I mean, I could have done some kind of research or thing maybe at that point and like pulled out like, well, that's just an old outdated idea from audiolingual and fossilization doesn't really have that much evidence. And I didn't do that. I just said, I see your concern. I have it too. Here's what I've seen. Will you hold
mhm.
space and take some time to see it yourself? And then, hey, if it doesn't work out, let's talk. I liked that approach.
two things. One, um, so, you know, big fan of structured input here at the SLAyyy pod. Um, and
Do you want to define that,
uh,
Bill?
yeah, structured input is forcing is it's a activity intervention something um, that right now all of the terms are mixed up in my head because I'm in a methods class, so everything's all anyway. So first thing, uh, students have to understand the meaning and form of a sentence in order for it to make sense is the idea. Um, and it's based on input processing, the principles of input processing, which I don't know if I've updated the SLAyyy blog with that, but I do have a rewrite of that coming down the line. So be on the lookout for that. I'll go in more in depth on what the input, what the principles of input processing are. But for example, if students see the word yesterday in a sentence, they don't have a reason to process the past tense because the work is already done for them through the vocabulary.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so,
and may I add, I think like in processing, it's not that they're like consciously going, oh, ED,
right,
it's that their
right,
brain ignores it because they're like, I know that's past. I don't need to work so hard. Brains are always
right.
trying to save time and effort.
Yes, exactly. So we have to structure the input in a way that forces students to do that processing without the giveaways. Um, a lot of really, I just love it. I could talk about it for hours. Diane and I have talked back and forth a little bit because when I learn something, I want to try to be able to make it applicable to as many languages as possible, to as many language teachers as possible. I do not know how to do it in I do not know how to do structured input in Mandarin or in at least non-conjugated languages. Anyway,
Yeah.
and I've shot some stuff to you back and forth, and it never really landed. And then but
Yeah. It's like,
hearing you talk about the tones, um, like structured input can be audible too.
that's true.
So you could
Hmm.
so um I'm a big fan of forced selection. Um, there's some rules that I follow for myself. Like I use it's the same vocabulary item in different forms that only make sense in the context. So, and students are reading it, they have to circle it.
Yeah.
Um,
I've seen Terry Waltz do essentially what I think you're saying with Chinese, where it's
yeah,
like forcing them to know, now am I saying the word for cool or the word
yeah,
for cry? Cool for cry or cool for cool.
yeah,
You have to
exactly.
hear the tone to interpret that meaning. So yeah.
I I've seen her do that. That's like the very first thing that she does. One of the very first things that she does.
Yeah.
I
Um,
watched her do it. I watched that exact demo on YouTube
Yeah.
one time.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I saw it on YouTube. um, oh crap, I forget what my other thing was going to be, but uh, thanks for joining us. Sponsored by Structured Input. Um,
Bill is in the pocket of the structured input lobby. I need the world to know.
Yes. Yes. I think we were talking, Bill, when you weren't here when we were doing the tech check, that you were in the pocket of structured input industrial complex. Yes.
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
But there's
Yeah,
value there. It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
there is. Um, and anyway, go on. If it was important, it'll come back up.
But I think that that ties into like maybe a girl boss of it is that like these are ways that we can address some of the concerns. Like a structured input is an input-oriented way based on the principles of input processing that we can speak to things that our stakeholders might find important. For instance, I did a very minimal explicit grammar teaching for a long time, and then now working with a program that has a pretty explicit grammar syllabus, and I'm able to speak to like, oh, when we do the structured reading, like reading activity, that differentiates between first and third person forms, like they have to know the difference between that. And so, someone coming from the paradigm of needing grammatical competence in order to communicate would say, aha, he is targeting first versus third person, present tense, verb endings, and stuff like that, where I am talking about it with my students in a much more, colloquial sort of like, did I do this or did so and so do this? And they're like, oh, so and so did it. And I'm like, great. And they have the sense. In German, we have a great word which is Sprachgefühl, which is language feeling. And that is
Mm,
they're developing that Sprachgefühl for like, ah, that seems right. Like, just by doing these activities, which someone else might describe in a more metalinguistic way. So maybe that's a
yeah.
girl boss preview there.
Mhm.
Um,
And on that, with the going back to I do forced selection, so Ben, plug your ears, because you're not going to like this. But I do have Claude help me create the structured input activities. I know. Um,
Well, Claude
and
is better choice-wise than some other options out
yes,
there.
um, I was actually talking to a student, like, I gave it all the ideas. I just need help fine tuning it and reproducing it over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
Um, because otherwise I'd need to hire an entire team, and we don't have that money or any. Um,
the team of two
but
teachers. Surprise. Um,
um,
maybe
yeah,
let's. Sorry, Bill. Was I your? Do you have anything else you'd like to say about that?
probably, but I am my brain's dead.
It's the end of the day for all of us.
Yeah, it's the end of
Then
a
maybe.
teaching day. And yeah, we're all in the midst of crises of various kinds. So yeah.
Happy
Then maybe we
crisis.
happy crisis. Maybe we oriented then towards gig keeping. The format is usually we look at um some sort of research article and we come away with our takeaways from that. But how can we ungatekeep our ways of communicating language knowledge? Diane, you had an idea towards that, I think.
I don't know if it's a really clear idea. I think our podcasts are trying to do it. I think the more I see things at like our meetings or sessions at a conference or something where there are people who are more of the researcher, university, a teacher educator, maybe that's actually very different things, by the way. I don't know. I didn't see that until I really got into universities. Like teacher educators at universities are often really different from second language researchers and the language departments and the linguistic departments, and they're also different. But the more those folks get together with K through 12 teachers, I think the better. And because we have different contexts and we have different strengths and expertise, and it's almost like we know about culturally responsive teaching, right? We see people with assets and skills and abilities, and we recognize those and build on them. And sometimes I think researchers get treated as they're irrelevant. Like, you don't know my classroom, so what kind of
Mhm.
nonsense? I don't even bother with it. And then there's on the other side, there's maybe a researcher, little mindset of, well, this is a teacher, so they don't really know much about this. They're probably doing, something rather like those are extreme, caricatures. But I have had some of both ideas in my mind before, and I'll admit that because this is, you got to see it to be able to deal with it. And so if I think we need, as a field of language education, from little tiny kiddos all the way up through university and beyond and research, if we are aware of each other's strengths and getting to know, in your context, you do this kind of thing. These are the sorts of problems you face. These are the kinds of questions you ask, and this is the means by which you try to solve those. We can appreciate each other a little bit more. I think one thing that I think is needed too is when I was a language teacher, I really thought that second language acquisition research was there to help me teach language, and it's really not. It's like some of them may have a classroom application. Sometimes they're just kind of forced to tack it on the end of an article. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just researchers talking to other researchers about how the brain works, or about something entirely different from
Mhm.
a classroom setting. And knowing that that's good for them, that's good. We might be able to pull something from it as a teacher, but we don't have to have it be about our context. So understanding each other's perspective, I think, is helpful.
Um, I think something that is important there, and like this whole, like I said, like this whole thing is kind of what my focus is on. Knowledge mobilization, knowledge brokerage, things like that. You can check out, oh, I forget, it's on the University of Delaware website, but I wrote a blog post for them last fall, um, exactly about this and how like this is why I wanted to do SLAYy
Mhm.
in the first place. It was like I love nerding out about language teaching. I love language teaching.
Yeah.
Like I love reading about it. I love the act of it. Um, and I know that not everyone has the time and the resources that I have. And so, like, why not help?
Yeah.
And so, hopefully, like, we're doing an okay job of like breaking things down for everyone and ungatekeeping. And I do have to give a shout out to uh, Dr. Joe Malin at Miami University, Ohio, um, who really helped me like get started on naming this thing that I wanted to do, knowledge brokerage.
Yeah, cool.
And also Dr. Elizabeth Farley Ripple does a lot of really great practical work on how to share information. Um, but I mean, that's why we're here.
Mhm.
And I'm so my heart, like you said, y'all are so great too. Like it's just,
Mhm.
and you too, Reed.
But I think that it's so hard it's again, I think of the time constraints, like how many teachers are maybe listening to us live right now who are like got an earpod in or like also making dinner or like are, on their drive home or something, whatever. Please don't look at the screen, like whatever, whatever it is
Yes.
that people are finding the pockets of time. Um, and I don't know, I found for myself that like the time that I invest into it really makes my teaching very rich and very I kind of my like theories about motivation come a lot from having listened to another podcast, to the Motivated Classroom podcast
Mhm.
by Liam Printer, and just talking about competence. I'm like, yeah, it feels good to do something well, and so I want to
Mhm.
know, like, knowing that I am doing the best by my students is a really satisfying feeling, and also you have to know when to say enough and when to like stop the blog scroll and stop the whatever. So we're in the podcast world, and so we're going to be like, listen to our podcast. That's great. That's a great way to learn about more knowledge. But I think, and there are other podcasts even here in this conference, like the
Yeah.
um
Claudia
the Claudia
Elliott's.
Growing
Elliott's
with proficiency.
podcast, Growing with
Mm-hmm.
Proficiency, excellent podcast, the Motivated Classroom podcast, just like Armando Bochinche. They like you can learn
Yes.
for days and days and days. You could just go down rabbit holes, and there's so many avenues within language teaching and teaching in general that you could just fall down. I went down an assessment rabbit hole for a while and just like was stuck there. Um, there are really so many like places you could go. You also have to know like how you can divvy up your time. I think it is important to like make the commitment to like putting some time into continued learning. And I think anyone who's listening to this probably is making that commitment already, but like, um, but I think that conveying that like, yeah, the like 20 minutes that on my drive to school, I listened to a language teaching podcast. I got some really good ideas about it. I thought about it all day, and then I made this change in my teaching, and it was really positive.
Mhm.
These are ways we can also talk about the investments that we're making, obviously, because we're making a kind of extraordinary. I don't want to say that in the sense of like it's so good, but like, just not quite ordinary investment in language acquisition research and teaching research. Like, but that time we can communicate about the time that we put in and what it brings to us. And
Yeah.
that, could inspire somebody else to get more interested in modern language teaching, in contemporary methods and conversations, and what is happening in the world of research. Neat.
So let's see, we did
Yeah.
a little bit of gaslighting and some
I mean,
Ungatekeeping.
yeah.
gatekeeping. Have we done enough girl
Um,
bossing?
Let's girl
I
boss.
we've
don't
done
I
so.
don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I would like to maybe lead with a very practical. Um, thing, and that would be over on the slaypod.com blog. There is the very first post that I wrote for the blog was slaying research use. So um,
Oh,
there's
I read
there's a
this.
note catcher. Yes, there's a
Totally
note
great.
catcher on there. Thank you. And that means so much from you. And I really tried to go about like how Ben and I kind of talk through things. Um, and also like I just needed something so that I wasn't so scatterbrained. Doesn't help with that, unfortunately. But uh, yeah, I really tried to go about it in a way that like this is what you can do. Like, what question do you have? This is where you can go um, look. And one of the really big things from that post, a line that I wrote that I was really, really proud of is it wasn't, it's never about knowing more than your colleagues. We are not in competition with our colleagues. I just want to teach better than I did yesterday, and I want to give our students the best opportunity they have to learn about the world, learn about themselves, learn about each other, and do it through a language. Um, and then hopefully they enjoy it enough that they can go out and make like real connections
Yeah.
with that language. I even just met a former student of mine this past weekend at the Indiana Spring Conference who I taught her in 2020, 2019. She's now a Spanish teacher.
Wow.
You did
And
it.
I know I jokingly say I found my replacement. But I'm excited to like watch her grow to like also share Spanish.
Yeah. And so your note catcher
So
can be a good way to like if we're just a classroom teacher and you're like, what am I doing with
yeah,
this research article? Just a
yeah.
place to start, a way to think about it. Yeah.
Hmm.
How else have you slayed, Diane? Like a moment where you're like, I think I conveyed this like really fundamental to me language SLA sort of thing to another person, and I saw some sort of transformation. Have you had a moment like that that sticks in your mind, or even little things?
I don't think I have. I mean, I don't
Mm.
like, not that it's so clear, you know?
Yeah,
So maybe
yeah, yeah.
more people need to comment on the conversation about language teaching podcast stuff because
Mm.
you know, we have had some lovely comments. We do YouTube, so that's an easier way to leave comments and have discussions there. But it's I think I think more it's been about my own growing sense of kind of how things might work. And like
Mm.
for me, just the satisfaction of like being able to continue to develop an understanding. Like there's always more questions you can ask. And now you're in a new situation with different people and like, oh, look, I didn't see this thing before because now I've got this new thing. I think this isn't well, I'll reference it because just because it's my thing. I'm not as interested in structured input. I'm really excited about the theoretical perspective of complex dynamic systems theory in looking at classrooms because I think it's really a compelling way to think about all the factors that we're talking about. I almost said this earlier, but now I'll say it because I think for me that's been very helpful in thinking about different kinds of research findings or different types of research contexts. Like, what was their system going on there and what difference did it make and that. So that was the theoretical perspective for my dissertation too. So I really am into that. And I think it's a good one for language teachers because it says things like, hey, maybe the people in the room were really off that day because it was, I don't know, a hot day and the air conditioner stopped working. And so I had to pivot on my lesson plan and then like, like those kinds of, even those sorts of factors, in addition to cognitive factors and what sorts of input experiences and language experiences are the students
Hmm.
getting.
Hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Mm.
I like
And for the
conveying it, but
record,
I
I don't.
haven't seen anybody make a major change because of that that I know of. That I know of.
It's like teaching. You send them out into the world and then you go, okay. Like maybe
Mm.
something, maybe you'll have a good life, but and I was like this much of a part of it. Yeah, so that's hard to say, I guess. Yeah, that's a big question. I'm thinking of like, I don't know, within my own department, I have like also taught Spanish in my department, and we were kind of talking about activities that we were doing that were working, and I was coming in being like, yeah, we plan with like can do's a la actful, and like that's how I should do it. And I think my colleagues were like, huh, that was like a newer concept to them. And so I introduced it sort of more through the activity of puedos that I got from Laura Sexton. And then later, I know Bethany Drew has had some of those, which is just like short interpersonal tasks that are like aligned to a unit. And often just like, I can do a linguistic thing in this context about this topic. And it's usually obviously what you're teaching to in your unit. And so I kind of presented it. I was like, oh, it's this like interpersonal activity that you can use in assessment to check whether or not students have XYZ skill. Um, but it opened the door for my colleagues to be like, oh, an activity like that, we always want to get the kids talking and stuff like that. And I was like,
Yeah.
secretly, I was like, but you have to give a lot of input on these things before these are even you think about doing
Even
this. So I was like,
possible.
um, and so they kind of incorporated that as an activity into their thing. But then later at the end of the year, when we were kind of discussing a final assessment, and I was a little bit nervous about like what direction the assessment might take, but we were talking about like we started talking almost in the same language of these like can do sort of things. It's like, can they provide basic information about themselves? Can they talk about their preferences related to this and that? And that was just like one way to get something something more aligned with research and so what people in research are talking about in proficiency based teaching into the conversation of like, look at this neat little activity that I'm doing, and they're like, that's so neat, and I was like, it sure is a neat activity. It's just an activity, not a planning mindset or anything, or like a total change of the way you think about how
Yeah.
you structure first the input and then all that sort of thing. um, but I think we also need to be clear about what any given activity in quotation mark does, like what it will do.
Hmm.
Like conveying that, like when we do an input heavy thing, step two isn't they immediately output grammatically
Mm.
perfect something, right? Like I'm
Right.
expecting them to do, like I knowing it ahead of time and being able to convey that to our colleagues too. Like I'm going to give them this list of can-do statements, and we are going to have had a lot of input and stuff about it in class. I don't think they'll do them all perfectly, and I can live with that for these reasons,
Yeah.
because I know how language develops, and I can, we can scale up and down the proficiency expectation, right? Um, but I think that's essential too, because unfortunately we end up speaking different languages sometimes when we do these things that like, I'm like, oh, I do this activity that is like input heavy, and like it what helps them develop their system. But if the mindset is like, but does it help them do something that's not quite that, then obviously you're going to have a mismatch in the conversation about what
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to say I was going to answer Diane's question, um, and say that like well, the most profound thing that Diane has explained, um, because just uh, because it's not just one thing. Diane just like plants seeds
Oh,
everywhere
yeah.
she's going.
Oh, yay. I love
Um,
that.
yeah. Um, maybe your chickens help spread them too. But
Mhm.
and like that's okay. Sometimes like this learning anything is a slow burn.
Hmm.
Like we can't just expect that it's gonna be great overnight.
Right. And that's not wrong.
Um,
That's not
and
bad.
it's
That's
mhm.
human. That's what we
And
do.
yeah, exactly. And like uh, if you're interested in improving your teaching at all, like that is like I mean for me that's my goal. Like I just want to
Mhm.
keep
Yeah.
learning and keep doing better. Like it may end up being a lot of work because I end up reinventing everything every year, but every year it gets better and I see the results with my students.
I wish for us all that like to be more inviting, like Dan said about like getting in conversation with university researchers. I wish us to
Mhm.
be more inviting to our own colleagues too, to just like, do you want us to come watch? Set up. We did an article about peer observation as being a greater indicator of like increased teaching efficacy than an administrative evaluation. Ooh. And
Ah,
that
surprise. Not surprised.
what?
Not surprised. Yeah.
And that helped me be so relaxed about my administrative evaluations, because I was like, all right, this does something.
Mm,
This does something else, right? But then I was like, I've had this idea in the back of my mind, and I proposed peer observations to my colleagues, and it started a lot of pretty good conversations about like what we're doing. Like, oh, I saw so and so doing this, and colleagues would change
mm,
their own activities, or they're like, oh, I saw you use. I had a colleague come observe me and was like, I saw you using a questioning strategy. It was basically circling, and I just did that when we were doing the reading warm up in my next class, and they responded really well. And I was like, hee hee. And so I think that like building the willingness to open our doors, it is scary to have like people come
Yeah.
watch you at any time, basically. But like
Yeah.
building the willingness to like have people come in and then maybe see if you can find time, professional monies to like get a sub for your class so you could go watch a colleague in your area.
Yeah.
It can be very transformative.
mm,
And to learn, again, we need to like see it modeled for us. It is nice to talk theory and all those sort of things, but like watching somebody implement an activity, or walking through the planning process of implementing it with them, is so much more powerful than just the theory. So,
Yeah.
Uh, Diane, could I ask that would you mind talking a little bit about coaching, branching off of that?
Oh, I would love to talk about coaching.
Like, I don't know how much time we have, but
We're kind of
um,
over what we were saying, but maybe we could tack a little bit on just that idea. Do you want me to go for it, or do you have more?
I think you would do it more eloquently than I.
Okay, I'll give it a shot, and you fill me in or fill in for me. The idea of like coaching is an idea where you're trying it out, getting some sort of mock attempt. So you've got in the language teaching context, Bill and I are both a part of an organization that's aimed at working on that. So it's the World Language Coaching Collaborative. It's just getting off the ground, so I can't say that much, but I want to
Mm.
credit that name. The
Input
it,
forward.
input forward, right? I forgot the last part. So yeah, so the idea is that through experiences as a language student that you debrief and start noticing the little things that the teacher did and then getting up and trying some of those yourself just for a few minutes and getting a few people to be your students and having people giving you supportive feed forward kinds of comments at the end where you're looking for how did you help make language comprehensible? How did you develop community? How did what sort of communicative purpose were you accomplishing or aiming towards in the little moments of time. So I think that's very powerful. I think that, and I have evidence of that because I actually did do a research study on this one, whereas K to 12 teachers' use of world language conferences. It's
Mhm.
an article with my advisor, Pam Wesley. And
I've cited it
coaching,
multiple times.
oh, hooray, because coaching and then being a language student and debriefing with the teacher and then observing a teacher teach other students. So we've just mentioned all the three big ones from these summer conferences, and there were many of them that they were talking about. Those were the things that were perceived as more sticky learning back in their classrooms. So you didn't just hear a presentation about how to do an activity, you watched actual interaction in a classroom. Not just that activity, but like the way people do all their things in a classroom. It's really powerful. So yes, I think coaching is powerful. If you get the opportunity to be in a place where you're going to get to try out things in a kind environment of support and get to just get your feet wet, it can be so helpful in going back to your classroom and feeling like you felt it literally in your body. You felt what it's like to teach in that way, and it kind of primes you for being able to do it with your students who are more challenging to work with usually. So,
Uh,
my little kitty cat's running around over here. Let's see.
Ooh,
There
Archie
she
had made an
is.
appearance.
Yeah.
Hi.
I saw a little bit of a dog head for a while, but
Yeah.
she
I
just came
just brought
walking up.
my
She
my
woke up from a
Bulbasaur.
nap.
With your bubbles. Did you get Pacopia?
Oh, very nice. I see there is
Did,
a question. Should we go for a question? Do we have?
Yeah, let's see. And I'll read it aloud straight from our chat. As a
Okay.
CA teacher, our goal is to let students know where they are and celebrate what they can end at the year, do at the end of the year, right? But for final assessment, how could I try to measure their proficiency without giving a traditional test like a
mm,
fill in the blank, a grammar, a writing, a reading? I know I want to do something that corresponds to CI teaching, but then my mind is, how do I assess them at the end of the year? Because unfortunately, I have to put some sort of grade in. What have you been doing? Well, I think my first thought is like you have to assess what you taught, and you taught via communication and input. And so you are going to assess in some sort of way that it is some sort of communication. So they're reading or listening to a text that might be just at or just the pinch above their level, based on the input that they've been having and what they've been successful with. And you know, comprehension questions or some sort of something that demonstrates that they understood the text, spoken, written, or signed. um and then in terms of output like that, I'd be curious to hear what Diane and Bill would have to say about that, is like how can we get students, uh because I think often when we think of assessment in quotation marks, and again, this is a conversation with another teacher, we need to be clear what we're talking about. When we think of assessment, we think producing beautiful sentences, on some sort of form of a test. Uh, what can we replace that with that is like an output that feels like it aligns with what we taught and in the way that we taught it, and is not exceeding the demands of the language system that we have built with our students. Are there, for either of you, is there anything coming straight to mind of like,
Yes. Yes.
yes, yes, go, Dan,
One of
go.
the things that I really liked doing was, and this is an end of the year or end of semester, in year one Chinese classes, I did this only at the end of the year. I would do little short interviews with students. I had the opportunity, I had small classes, so I didn't find it too cumbersome to get time with each student. 2, 3, 4 minutes at the most. I would sit in the hallway with my table. They would be doing some task in the classroom and then students one at a time would come out there, talk with me. The thing that I liked about the format was I did it so that there were multiple options for students. They walked up, they knew that we had practiced the way we were going to do it, but I had not shown them the pictures they were going to see. So there were 4 panel pictures. These are available for the AP Chinese test at least. So they kind of tell a story. And so
mhm,
I found several of those and put 4 or 5 down, thinking of like, does this level of students have some things to say about what you see in here? Then it got put on the table and they had 4 or 5 choices, 30 seconds, pick one that you feel you can tell me
mm,
about, and then they would talk. I used to try to time them. Bad, bad. It added a stress. But just like tell me all the things you can about this, and if you get stuck and need my help, I'll ask a question. So it became a little bit interpersonal, but I graded it with a rubric. Rubrics are my total favorite thing for doing this rather than point scores. You can take a rubric and then like they've accomplished this kind of performance, then they get an A. They got this kind of performance, that's a B. Like that sort of thing. So that's my
mhm.
favorite.
Yeah, and on the logistics sides of it, um, the way you align a performance descriptor or proficiency level with a grade is so context specific.
It's
So
tricky.
um, please do like consider like, okay, if um, just consider your classroom. You all do. You're fabulous, but just keep in mind if you're looking for a rubric that it might not meet your context. Same with any uh, resource. Um, as far as what I'm doing practically in class, I usually we have to have semester exams. I usually just do whatever the last unit we're on, that I just turn it into the final exam. Um, because language is cumulative. So if they were able to do this thing back then in this first unit, hopefully it'll show up. This thing, a question for another time is what to do to like try to recycle vocabulary better. But Um, but I have students make infographics almost every unit. Um, and then they practice presenting with each other. They print them off, and there's a blog somewhere in the pipeline about this too, um, and a presentation, actually. But then for to turn it into an assessment, because I have students do like not spontaneous, simultaneous presentations that I learned from the comprehensible classroom years and years ago. So they do that multiple times throughout the year. For the final, they present it in front of the class with a question, with a Q&A. So I'm getting, and I tell them the assessment's really about the interpersonal Q&A. The presentation, the infographic or whatever it may be, is just the context for me to ask you questions. You're demonstrating what you can do, and I'm going to try to push back and see how well you can respond, how well you understand the questions, and how well you answer with how much detail. Um, and then I have 5 points of the 30 comes from like presentation skill, or product presentation. Um, so the students who do like to go all out on creativity can, but those who don't like to go all out on creativity don't get hurt. But infographics are a little interesting because the format, the visuals have to tell the story as well. But just use Canva. They've got all the elements that you could ever need. And then I just do a writing after that. I'm still working on getting listening comprehension in there.
Yeah.
Mm. I think something that just came to mind as well is just um Anne Marie Chase had a thing where she was like, yeah, I just like put up a bunch of prompts on the board that go back and forth. And I have them kids do with like kind of inner outer circle. And like at some points the inner circle talks,
Mhm.
and then at some points the outer circle talks. And it can be a photo, like
Mm-hmm.
Diane said, like an image related to something you studied, to a story that's been told or read, a sort of cultural topic, anything that you've been exploring. And then just you float around with a clipboard and mark down, you have your
Mm-hmm.
rubric, and that rubric could
Yes.
be as simple as they said multiple sentences about the same topic in the language. They said some phrases in the language about the topic. Um, Whatever you need
Yeah.
for your level and in context, that can be part of the exam in quotation marks as well. My wish for exams everywhere is that they're broken up into like multiple days and smaller chunks. Like instead of doing one big exam, if that's not possible for you, then obviously do what you
Mm-hmm.
gotta. But like if you can do listening on one day in which you also do some sort of other activity that feels nice, that helps. And so the exam day is not just like a giant bomb of stress for everybody. I've been, obviously to like prepare them, we'll do the fun listening game right before we do the listening assessment, and then on reading assessment day we're doing the reading game, and so just to kind of prime the pump
Nice.
as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see there's another question,
Mhm.
and I'm happy to tackle it first.
Mhm.
Regarding your how to talk to colleagues without name dropping comments, what do you say to colleagues who are looking for a resource like movie clips to teach XYZ grammar concepts specifically? So this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. Um, and this was in that language transfer uh, presentation that I was talking about earlier, that I name the function, not the form. So um, if someone's trying to do XYZ grammar concept, but what are we trying to do with it?
Mhm.
Okay, so um, maybe it would be better to look for a clip that where you can do that function,
Yeah.
because
Nice.
then that grammar is going to naturally come up.
Hmm. Yes.
So like um if you and actually I have no problem like targeting the grammar. more on that later at a later date. But like, uh,
Yeah, maybe in a
anyway,
different way than the questioner's asking.
yes,
You're
yes,
doing
yes.
something a little different with it, but
Yes, but um, yeah, if it's to get, it's also like whether it's to give students exposure to the language, because again, like they can't attach anything to their first system
yeah.
if they don't know what it means. Like if they don't have any conceptual framework for it, like they can't attach it and make meaning of it. Um, so is it to get students exposure to the form, or like to introduce it, like maybe kind of like pace modeling esque? What the present? No, I forget what
Yep.
it stands for.
Presentation, attention, co-construction,
Co-creation
extension.
extension.
Hmm.
Nice. Okay. I always
Um,
forget.
um, so like then it's just about like what's the goal, what's the communicative function that you're
Hmm.
trying to convey with this,
Yeah.
um like, and also don't, like I would
Like,
say like keep it to that specific reason. Like, I'm not giving all of the reasons for to use imperfect or preterite. This is background information, and this is an event,
yeah. It's,
or this is
and
setting the scene. Yeah.
what I was thinking was like an example that came to my mind is like, well, I want students to be able to talk about their childhood. Like that's the
Okay.
kind of function you're saying, I think.
Yes. So then it
So
would
giving
be narrating
examples
the
of that could
past.
help. Mhm.
Yeah. So like narrating the past.
Mhm.
For example, with I was trying to get students to notice, or trying to get students to process, um, if hypothetical. So if I were, I would. Um, I could say, hey, this is the imperfect subjunctive. This is the conditional. Um, it's the imperfect subjunctive because blah 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 blah. Or I could say, hey, uh, we're using this form to make a hypothesis. So when you want to make a hypothesis, let's start with tuviera.
Mhm.
So, well, let's start with si tuviera. If I had, let's start there. Um, oh, do you need to ask who are you talking about now? So we're hypothesizing. We got the tuviera. Who are we hypothesizing about? Then we can just tack on like the ending after that. In Spanish, like you've got like you just add little letters once you got like the irregular form. But yeah, and then you're teaching the functional chunk of grammar as well. Um, and again, hopefully not over cognitively overloading students with a lot of rules that they don't need in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are so thankful to Karen and the CI Reboot team for inviting
Yeah.
us to do this crossover episode. We are two podcasts that like each other and the CI Reboot at the same time. And so this has just been such a pleasure. Um, our podcasts you can find at SLAyypod.com. Diane, where can people find your podcast?
We are on both on YouTube under Conversations about Language Teaching and on any of your podcast apps. So Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you search for Conversations about Language Teaching, you will find us.
Likewise, you can find us on all of the common podcast sites as well.
Yeah.
And you know where else we would love for you to find us or anything is at the CI Reboot conference, which is upcoming. And if you would like to get a discount on your registration, because you are an intelligent, fun, cool person, then you can use the discount code SLAYY, only two Y's this time, SLAYY26, to get a discount on your registration. And we'll be happy to know that you're going to the CI Reboot because it slays. This has been such a joy. Karen, do you have any
Yeah.
messages for the listeners before we skedaddle off into the wild blue yonder?
Okay, I
Um,
think we
Oh,
go for our
Then we get to close our
closing.
podcast. Yeah, we always like to say slay and then we say bye.
And then
So go
usually
out
Reed and
there.
I say something like Reed will say, I always find it interesting. He says it with a different verb form than I do. So he says, like, I've been Dr. Reed Briggs, and I say, I am Dr. Diane Neubauer. So
Mm.
So I've been Ben Fisher Rodriguez.
And I am Bill Langley Bostic.
thanks for listening.
Until
So
next
go
time,
forth.
go out and slay. Bye.
Bye.